Hello, world. This is the Know Your Place podcast. I'm Charles Altendorf, and we're here for episode 44. And yeah, cool. So on this week's episode, because I always try to stay relevant. I know. I thought I would talk about sort of hot take, if you will, on what do we consider great leadership in the world? What do we consider a great world leader, and what does that look like in different countries? And this all sort of hinges on, of course, last week I talked about the death of George H.W. Bush, how it was the end of an era, and Angela Merkel is officially no longer going to be the leader of her party in Germany, and we have a bunch of riots happening in France, and of course, there's still the constant tug of the media and Trump thing here in the States. And in the United Kingdom, of course, Theresa May has been under a lot of pressure recently. So, yeah, let's dig into it right there. Look at all these countries I mentioned off the bat. So, uh, first, I'll sort of start in America. And I think, sort of, obviously, a lot of people universally saw Washington as a great leader, and I guess still do, even most historians still do. But I think in sort of the modern era, when you talk about great presidents, a lot of people would talk about JFK, and in some ways that was somewhat unfair to other presidents because we didn't, when he got assassinated, we just don't have enough time to picture, we didn't get to see him fail at all or anything, or see him last out too long. But they say instantly when you get assassinated, there's a martyrdom factor that people remember you better. I don't know if that happened, if that's purely the reason why people loved him so much or not. Um, but what one I'd always thought of as a great leader, and I think most people still agree with this take, even though time has passed a whole bunch, is I think of Dwight D. Eisenhower as a great American president. And I mainly think of this because this is the old style. He in a lot of ways formed the grand coalition that eludes most leaders in modern times. Or he was offered the nomination for president by both parties. Imagine that. That would never happen today. I don't think there's anybody universally loved that much. And he was the leading general when we won World War II, and he yeah, well, I should when we won World War II. The leading general of the American forces in World War II, and I think we that was the role model, was the great delegator. He was so famous for being a delegator and just having a way of finding the right person for the job and putting them on it. And that was, in a lot of ways, that's also how people kind of saw Washington, right? He was a great general, but a lot of people said he wasn't even the strategic mind behind a lot of his victories. And you know, he had Hamilton design the economy, or he had and Franklin do foreign affairs. So it, that was sort of the prototype of what we used to consider, I think, a great leader in America, was actually someone who was great at delegating. But something seemed to shift in modern times. You know, um, and maybe it was because we as America wanted a more active role from our president. People got really fired up by Kennedy and his speeches, and telling his generals no, and you know, in the Bay of or getting into it with his generals over the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it seems to have progressed from there. You know, we got excited about. I mean, granted, we did like it when there was times when Bill Clinton and Reagan found a way to reach across the aisle and get things done, or even Bush or Obama to a lesser degree, Bush Jr. and Obama to a lesser degree. But I don't think it's as, I think now we really, in this country, unfortunately, want to see a leader calling the shots, and it's kind of sad in a way. To me, it feels like we've lost some of what America was all about by demanding these strong arm presidents calling the shots. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. You can let me know what you think in the comments section. But I just under Bush after 9/11, it seemed, you know, people kind of let his leadership and his group sort of run over a little bit, because we want to defend ourselves from terrorism, and we want to see somebody strong who's going to fight back. And then under the Obama years, it became sort of a we want someone who's really seen well to be doing well by the outside world, if you will. It was sort of he was in America. We often say that the next presidential election will be the next president will be the polar opposite of the last. That the American people always vote for the opposite, and it seems like it holds true a lot. And so if everybody wanted somebody in Bush that was seen as being tough domestically, then when Obama came around, they wanted to see him as being perhaps not as tough domestically and more seen as a peacemaker, even though I could make all kinds of arguments how his administration ended up not being that way. But it's interesting to see sort of if Bush was an uneloquent type, we wanted to see someone super eloquent and intelligent that looked like he was a part of sort of a world class of leaders. And now again with Trump, there's been a bit of a shift. Although I would say it's almost not as drastic as it was between Bush and Obama, because while Trump is definitely not eloquent at all, he is also still he is a businessman. It's still his big business. He has international. He was internationally known for business. So he is still seen a bit as a strong arm international businessman. And to me, that's really kind of interesting that we've sort of shifted from what I would call the period of wanting a delegator, because I don't see I see a lot of people now clamoring for somebody to take charge all the time, or even I even saw a right wing talk show host. Right wing. I don't like using the terms right wing and left wing. A talk show host named Michael Savage. I'm sure a lot of my listeners have heard of him if you haven't Googled him, and you can see what his views are. But he got all fired up and excited when Bill Clinton at a rally talked down some protesters. And that really surprised me. Just how strong people are just dying for somebody to take charge now and act like a tough guy. And traditionally, that is not what we've really wanted out of the American presidency. Yeah, I know it seems like that we have, and some people can make arguments for people like Jackson and Teddy Roosevelt being strong armed. But I mean, a lot of the presidents we remember best or seemed to guide America the best were delegators. They were not strong presidents, and it's interesting. So why I bring this up is I want to shift over to sort of other countries and compare how I see it. And I'm sure I'm going to get all kinds of hate mail from people from other countries for telling me I don't understand their countries at all. But this is my podcast, so I'm allowed to indulge in certain things here. So I want to talk about sort of a contrast in Russia. Russia is a country that I would say nowhere else in the world, perhaps maybe China or some other places, they they almost clamor for a strong arm leader. Now, I don't it's not to say there aren't plenty of Russians that have revolted and want other kinds of rule, but I think a lot of the reason why the Romanovs failed, a lot of people say, oh, it's because they were backbreaking, they were overbearing monarchs. I think that's the opposite of the truth. I think the Romanovs failed because they were soft. I really do. And I'm sure I'm going to get all kinds of flack from historians. You don't understand the Romanovs. But have you read them? They're all the stuff I've read from them is stuff where like they're trying to seem like they love the people, or they feel the pain of the people, or they write about feeling the pain of the people at least. And the hardcore Leninists and Trotskyites and And then, of course, eventually the Stalinites, they didn't give a crap about that. They were like, we're going to come in and take charge and we're going to reform Russia and murr. And you can see it now, like when the Soviet Union failed under Gorbachev, he was trying to allow the satellite countries to do what they want to do or have more autonomy. That's not what they want. And everybody I talk to who's like a fan of the Soviet Union or a fan of Russia or like likes Russia. Not people who defected and who like America and who've moved here and want to be a part of the American way of life, but who still want to maintain the Russian way of life. They just, oh my God, they just really despise any type of autonomy. And they think they need a strong-armed central leader. And that's why it's no surprise at all Putin has been so successful. Like, that's it, and it's shocking to me. It really shows a lack of international understanding, in my opinion, when I see the Western press act so like shocked and appalled at the way Putin does things. It's like, no, that's how they want it there. That's what they see is what they want. They want somebody come in and take charge and, oh look, he just off some of his opposition or he's made their life difficult. They don't care. And that's not to say that, like I said, there's certainly plenty of people who protest, but there is a silent majority in Russia, based upon everything I've read and people I've interacted with, that I really think they like the strong arm leader. That's how you're seen as a good leader in Russia, is if you really strong armed, you've almost colonized land with what they're doing in Crimea, and you're really given the EU fits and you're giving other places fits with your diplomacy. That really gets the Russians hot and bothered and excited. And you can just see it, man. Like when they were hosting the World Cup, man, they were so on fire. And it was, it's exciting as an outside observer, but quite terrifying if you're in, one of these places that abuts them, like Estonia or Lithuania or Ukraine, I or Poland. Poland's very afraid. I don't blame them. I mean, geez. So then sort of turns me over to I guess I'll talk about the United Kingdom next. And to me, the United Kingdom is really a tricky animal to crack, because it almost seems like they hate everybody eventually over time. They just grow to hate them, you know. Because I see people now ragging on Thatcher, and I've seen a lot of hate for Tony Blair now, and it's and famously, Churchill lost an election before he was re-put back in, and it's just bizarre. It's like there is no good pattern for being successful long term in the United Kingdom. I mean, you could argue that sort of a little bit of kiss up to colonialism from Thatcher and Churchill is what works the longest. Sort of a softer foreign policy like a Cameron or Tony Blair, I guess doesn't work as long. And Theresa May is definitely unpopular. They think she's being too soft, from what I can generally tell. People on both sides, both Labour and Tory, and I think it's kind of it's scary, or I would hate to run for office in England. I just think it would be painful. Nobody, you're just going to be unpopular no matter what you do. And I think part of the reason is because you have in the UK, being sort of places like Northern Ireland and Scotland and Wales, and then some of the former colonies. I'm not sure how many of the foreign colonies, like the Falklands or somewhere, how much they still vote or get represented in Parliament. But I think it's because you have such factioning that's occurred now over such a long period of time, with so many cultures being intertwined, that there's just no way to appease everyone, and that's why it's so difficult to lead the UK. But deep down, I think it also has a little bit to do with not getting rid of the monarchy. And I know I'll get some flack for this from the monarchy lovers. Yes, I'm talking to one of my New Zealand friends here, but because they never totally got rid of it, I think they still deep down, a lot of them crave that old colonialism being strong again. And in modern times, it's just not possible, or at least I don't think it is. I mean, I don't envision England coming around and starting to iron fist back some of its colonialism. But it's yeah, it's they 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 just it's a tough cookie. There in my opinion there is no way you can really be a strong England a leader of the UK for a long period of time. The closest we've ever seen, like I said, has been Thatcher and Churchill. And even then, there's still lots of wild criticism of them rampant everywhere. And it's crazy. So now but if there's one place where that's even more apparent, it's France. I literally know of no one that France loves. France is constantly cracking on whoever their leader is. It doesn't seem to matter. I mean, it's just like so. And the reason why I bring this up is, Macron, after winning the election and being hailed as a great victor over a force that people didn't like in Le Pen, uh, well, I should say a lot of international people didn't like. I don't really have a good read on the French. I would say it's the countryside versus sort of the business class in Paris kind of deal. The business class in Paris wants to have a more internationally acceptable leader, and the French working class is starting to lean more towards the Le Pen and now this new yellow shirt movement. But it's never. I mean, if you want to talk about somewhere that's even harder to govern for a long period of time, I know De Gaulle is still reasonably popular, but man, there were attempts on his life even when he was in charge. And he's like considered their most popular leader. They named the stinking airport after him. I mean, good grief. And then you want to talk about Napoleon. I mean, yeah, he was popular and he did pretty well. He had to straight up act like an autocrat. And even then, there was still lots of criticism of Napoleon, and he got exiled. Now, I mean, we could say it was foreign leaders that mainly did that, but it's hard to be a strong leader in France as well. And the I mean, this whole rioting right now is just perfect proof of that, right? So they elect this guy, and he's seen as he's trying to appeal to being younger and hip while still being appealing to international types, and the working class just absolutely despises anything he's trying to put forward. And again, I don't. To me, it's kind of immaterial. Gas tax, no gas tax, tax on this, whatever they're doing. It just seems immaterial to me. France just seems like a perpetual riot. But this goes back to even 1792. What do? They say, no, there's too much power in the hands of the kings and the elites. And I've heard a lot of great stories about this. I'd recommend everybody read the book Scaramouche and read The Scarlet Pimpernel and read 1792 by Victor Hugo. It's just really impressive to see the morality on display in the fights over it. And I know I've said this in multiple podcasts, so I apologize for beating a dead horse, but I mean, Robespierre is a perfect example. They finally get the overthrow. They finally do it. They kick out the monarchy. And then they institute just crazy authoritarian measures to the point that the guillotine ends up killing the guy who started it 18 months later. That is France for you. Good luck trying to hold power and be considered a great leader in France. That's all I got to say. So now we turn around and we talk about somewhere like Germany. And I talk about this now because Angela Merkel's power is finally fading. She's almost been in charge for 2 decades now, bordering on 2 decades. And I want to say this because I actually think Germany is somewhere that tolerates a leader for a longer period of time. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Hitler, but Hitler, even, he almost lasted a decade before he lost a war. I mean, they didn't ever kick him out, you know. I think Germany will tolerate a lot more in a leader. You look at Bismarck; he was in charge for a very long time. The Weimar didn't last because of the turmoil of the Great Depression, but it seems like Germans are actually more level-headed about having a longer-term leader, which is good and bad. Again, I don't, as an American, we have this totally different thing where we vote directly for our president and they only serve 2 terms max. So it's really hard for me to sort of compare us. We don't compare well in that thing to European governance. So yeah, it seems like they generally tolerate a longer leader and they take a more longer view. And I don't know if that's good or bad. For me, it would feel weird, like say I voted for Obama in '08, and that was right after I came out of high school. It would feel weird for me to be, or well, let's say even better example. Bush got elected in 2000 when I was middle school. It would feel extremely weird for me if Bush was still in charge now. Like that seems like eons ago in American time. Like what could he even be doing anymore? You would just be totally irrelevant. But Merkel's been in charge that long, and before him, Schroeder was in charge for a long time too. So it's him, her. So it's very interesting to me. It's interesting to me what people expect out of leadership. I guess if I had to point my finger on what Germans want, I think they just want a continual what they've seen pretty much since 1990. This continual slow growth of their economy that seems to just overtake all their rivals. They have the largest surplus in the world. It's I think that's okay with them. And that's I almost think that's commendable in a way. I almost like it better. But then you gotta wonder if it's authoritarian. You just gotta wonder, right? Like why is everything devolving into chaos in other countries? And don't get me wrong, there's definitely been some chaos in Germany too now. There is some switching happening up, but why does everything seem like a constant crazy crap show in France and the UK and even America? And in Germany, it's just like, no, we're okay. We're gonna slowly grow, slow growth. Here we go. Our mail service is taking over England's mail service. Oh, we're just a little bit bigger, a little bit more powerful. I don't know. You know, maybe maybe that's the way to go. But I don't. I've never, in my opinion, I've never seen a leader like Eisenhower or Washington emerge again. You know, it will probably take another war or chaotic situation to reach that level. So that's what I think about it. Let me know in the comments what you think about what a great leader is, or what you need to do to retain power and look like a strong leader in some of these countries. And thanks. Bye.